Hello there. My name is Garrett McQueen. I'm the Director of Artist Equity at the American Composers Orchestra, and I'm extremely honored and excited to share with you today a recent conversation that I had with composer Viet Cuong and percussionist Victor Caccese. Coming up, the American Composers Orchestra will be presenting a piece called Renewal. It's a composition by Viet Cuong that features percussion quartet, and it was such a great time for me to sit down and chat with Viet as well as Victor, one of the featured soloists, about their upbringing in music, their ideas about percussion concerti generally, the process of learning and developing the piece Renewal that will be presented on this concert, and some of the broader narratives and dialogues that this piece inspires. I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, so Viet, I'll start with you. What's your relationship with the idea of classical music as many people still think about it today? The idea that the orchestral experience is more than what many people tend to think of.
Yeah, I grew up playing percussion and clarinet band class, starting in sixth grade. And so my relationship with this thing we call classical music, um, I suppose started then. But at the time, I didn't think of it necessarily as classical music because I wasn't playing music by Mozart and Beethoven and I was in band. It was just like an activity I did, and um, experience that I really cherished growing up was being in band, and it's where I made my friends and where I really fell in love with music. So it wasn't really, I guess, until I got to the end of high school, um, when I was looking to maybe pursue a career in music and a career in what we now call classical music. And I ended up going to a music conservatory for college. And that was when I really started to learn the the repertoire of the orchestra world. And um, a lot of it is really great music, and I learned a lot from studying it. But it was always kind of an interesting uh, thing as a composer to think about where you fit into this orchestral world where tradition is plays such a large role in programming and what people listen to.
Victor, I wonder if you share that experience as having started in the band room. There are a lot of Suzuki string players out there. Are you also a band kid?
I am, yeah. Actually, I'm realizing that we have kind of a similar story for our entryway into college and conservatory and studying music. I started as I guess I started a little bit more as a pianist, played piano for some years, started playing percussion in the bands in high school because I was interested in playing in the marching band, and they stuck me on percussion because they were like, "Oh, it's a keyboard instrument. It looks like a piano. You'll be able to pick it up pretty quickly." And then I learned obviously that percussion involves lots of different instruments, drums, keyboard instruments, some instruments that you wouldn't normally think of as instruments, like we have in blind glasses in Viet's piece. So I was opened up to this whole world of percussion, and got really excited about that, and got into some schools for college and studying percussion in college, and then obviously learned even more about like what percussion is and the rich history that it has in symphonic music, and then realizing that there were people actually writing music for percussionists today. It didn't have to just be playing the timpani part to Beethoven symphonies, which is really fun to do. But realizing that there was actually all these other elements to percussion as well that were very current and very new. And I think that was exciting for me when I was in school.
As a fellow band kid, I argue that from the earliest years of our development as musicians, our ears were conditioned in a different way, considering the fact that band music is, in itself more contemporary. Victor, I wonder if you share that opinion or that reality, and if that plays a role in the way you think about or engage music today as a performer.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm definitely I can remember the times in my undergraduate when I realized when I started listening to more contemporary music and contemporary band music, um, and having a real attraction to that, but also selfishly a very an attraction to the percussion section. in those bands and in those orchestras. Uh, Actually, it's a funny anecdote. I remember because I come from kind of a somewhat musical family, at least music lovers. So my mom and my dad, they were music lovers and they loved going to the symphony. And it wasn't until I started playing percussion in high school to there where they were like, oh, my ear never was drawn to the percussion section in these symphony works and these band works before, but now I'm like hearing the percussion sounds that they're making and I'm realizing that there's some really interesting things happening in the back row of the orchestra and in the bands. So yeah, definitely like the ear really started to gravitate towards that.
Viet, I wonder if you have a similar reality from the composer perspective. As having that band foundation, do you think that played a role in the way that you develop music and think about music today?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the fact that when we're in eighth grade and we're playing music by these composers, and I remember like when I was in eighth grade, like being curious about the names at the top of each of our parts, and I would like search them on the internet. And back then it was like probably Yahoo instead of Google, but like
Hmm.
I remember like going to Yahoo or Ask Jeeves or whatever and typing in their name and seeing that they were like alive and well and writing more music. And it was really, I think, because of that that I knew that being a composer was a viable path, and that if like Frank DeKelly, this guy named Frank DeKelly, he like lives in LA and he's like writes music and everything, and uh, it kind of inspired me to see that for myself.
So why is it important to help audiences through new music to understand what you're describing, the value of being a composer? What role does new music play in framing that reality for more people?
Well, I think any form of art created by people living in the world today reflects the world today in the way that Beethoven, when he was writing music, was grappling with everything that was happening in his life and uh, his world around him back then. And so, like I said, like any form of art, even within the whole world of music, uh, pop music, and like as opposed to classical music, it all captures what we're all going through in our experience in the world today. And I think it's important that even orchestral music too has these voices. When I think in 100 years, when we look back, we want to be able to see the continuation of composers telling their stories.
Yep. Victor, since those days of being thrown into the percussion section of your marching band, has your sense of loyalty or responsibility to the music of today evolved, grown, been impacted by your career so far?
Yeah, it definitely has. I think that certainly as a percussionist, we, percussionists don't have centuries of music to draw upon when programming concerts or, when curating programs. I think that we have some music that we think of as being sort of our like percussion chamber music classics or like even concerto classics, but it's really not that much. So I think like what we're doing currently, the work that we are doing currently, I think we feel a responsibility for contributing to the repertoire that percussionists play, whether it be a percussion quartet like Sandbox or any other kind of mixed ensemble where percussion is involved or small percussion chamber groups. I think that is sort of in a way that's our mission or part of our mission is to continue to realize new works for percussion and to be sharing that and contributing those works contributing to the percussion repertoire. I think that it's an exciting time for us. I think we sometimes think of like, if there was a string quartet that was playing when the first Haydn quartets were being written, that was probably maybe a very exciting time for them because it was like some of the first sort of big works for that instrumentation. So I think we feel somewhat similarly in that we are contributing to the repertoire.
You've inspired a question when you say that there isn't the centuries long tradition of percussion repertoire. While that is true, I can't help but to think about the eons long tradition of hitting things and those things making sounds that we react to? How do you engage those two realities, the lack of the percussion tradition versus the ever existent reality of hitting things and making noise?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's something that we often think about. It's at least in the back of our minds because, I think that sort of the sort of percussion involved in a sort of classical music area, or for a classical music community, I suppose, is a rather new thing, at least with percussion being like on the featured instrument at the front of the stage. But yeah, absolutely. Like, there's like every single culture has its own relationship with percussion in some way that goes back to, probably the beginning of time or the beginning of humans. Like we were hitting things or making sound or communicating through percussion. I think a few of us have had the privilege of traveling to some other areas of the world and getting to be exposed to some of that percussion music. And I don't know if it necessarily exactly specifically works its way into the work that we do with composers nowadays. I think that is definitely an inspiration, though, and it is something that we're always trying to be aware of. That there are these great long traditions of percussionists throughout the world, and if there's ever moments when that is on display in some of the music that we're playing, then I think that that's exciting for us too.
Viet, I wonder if the human history of percussion, as we're talking about, was something that you were thinking about in the development of renewal, especially considering that it's not just snare drums and mallet percussion that you include. There are a lot of objects that many people wouldn't consider percussion instruments that you utilize in this piece of music.
Yeah, I guess uh, when I was writing Renewal, there were certain things that uh, I was thinking about with like even the crystal glasses. We don't think of it as a percussion instrument normally, but it is like quite literally something we are holding in our hand. And when we are with other people, we are like toasting with people, and that is percussion. It's like we're communicating something by doing that. And I think kind of what Victor was saying, like the use of percussion as like a form of communication throughout time um, is, I think it kind of plays a role in this piece. It's like this piece, it's in many ways is about communication between the soloists with the orchestra and communicating between like me and what I'm trying to say to the audience with the piece.
Yeah, I really do love the way the piece starts, Victor. There has to be a level of carefulness that goes into uh, using the glasses to cheers each other. I mean, not spilling any of the water because of the pitches. I mean, is it different engaging percussion instruments that aren't typically seen or regarded as such?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, specifically with the beginning of renewal, there is a certain technique to it. It is a kind of communication that we have to have with the person who we're cheersing with, because if we're both coming in for a cheers, but somebody's coming in like a little too hot, then like it you know, might not sound good, or God forbid, a glass might break or something like that. So yeah, there's definitely, I think with any new percussion instrument, we have a certain amount of experimentation that has to happen with just finding what the best sound is, or the best way to achieve the best sound that that object is able to give you. Um, and there was a certain amount of just practicing and experimenting and just putting in the time of kind of cheersing back and forth with people, just going back to the sort of basics. If there were to be like scales and arpeggios on the on the wine glasses, there were kind of like a set sort of basic techniques that I think that we had to get comfortable with.
Yeah, and I guess I'm assuming that it's water in the glasses, but I won't get in your business in that
It
regard
is water for now. For now.
for now.
Most cost effective thing to put in the glasses.
That's right. That's right.
Viet, I wonder if you'll talk a little bit about the history of the piece. How was it originally commissioned, and if it's developed since that original commission?
Sure, yeah. So I've known like Sandbox for a long time. Like Victor, I've known you since my freshman year of college. You were like a year ahead of me in the program, and Terry and the quartet as well was a year behind me in college. And I remember like Terry was on like the same floor of my dorm. And So uh, I've known Sandbox for a long time, and I've always admired them and had so much love for their playing. And it was maybe like, I want to say like 10 years ago, we first were starting to talk about like, oh, maybe like we could work together to create some sort of concerto with orchestra. And I think it was because Victor, you, and maybe Terry had played in some of my like large ensemble music when you were either at Peabody or even Yale.
Right. Yeah.
And um, we just kind of had this idea, like maybe I think it was 10 years ago, maybe like not 8 or 9, 10 years ago. And so, um, we were like, okay, well, cool. Well, let's like think about what we like, how we could do that. And anytime you want to write for a large ensemble, there always has to be kind of like the right place at the right time sort of situation. In terms of just getting the opportunity or getting someone to kind of feel excited about your idea. And so it was like maybe a couple years before um, this opportunity came where I got asked by the Albany Symphony to write a piece for their new music ensemble. It's called Dogs of Desire. And uh, they had this idea, though, where um, perhaps a piece could be about renewable energy because Albany Symphony is based in upstate New York near Schenectady, where the GE headquarters was at the time. And they had this growing renewable energy initiative and program. And I visited it, and it was quite amazing to see. And they were supporters of the orchestra because they were nearby. And so they wanted to kind of celebrate renewable energy through a piece. And they also had a request that it be a sort of collaboration between the symphony and some sort of group. And I was like, I know just the group. And so I remember I think I texted you, Victor, and I was like, hey, do you guys want to play with the Albany Symphony? And I think you even texted back like, sure. Is it like just like with the orchestra in the back of the orchestra?
Right. Right.
And I was like, no, I think it's going to be like a concerto.
Yeah. I
And
remember. Yeah.
so from the beginning, we were like, okay, well, we're going to write a concerto, and it's going to be about water, wind, and solar power. And from the beginning, we knew we were going to have a movement about each one of those. And
Mm-hmm.
it was really just about finding the right instruments. And I had written a piece called Water, Wine, Brandy, Brine, which uses 15 crystal glasses. It's like a 13-minute long piece. And so I used material from that for the water movement because I thought it symbolized not just water, but the other themes of the piece really well.
Victor, how has your relationship with this piece of music evolved over the course of your relationship with it?
Yeah, totally. Well, certainly I feel just as a performer and as a player, we've gotten the chance now to play it a number of times over the years. So it feels more like we're able to take ownership over it. It feels really comfortable. It feels like a piece that is ours. And that's really exciting to get to go on stage and know that this is a piece that we really feel is a big part of our identity as a quartet. Um, I think that I'm constantly just loving this whole idea of cooperation and teamwork and collaboration that literally brought the piece to life, what the piece represents, but also um, physically how you play the piece. I think that I'm always finding new moments where if I don't have my colleague across from me or next to me to sort of fill in the music that I'm not playing, then I would just not have like this full composite or this full, composite melody or composite rhythm that's happening in the quartet. That's really essential to what makes the piece so special. So I think I'm always finding new moments in each of the three movements where that really is apparent, and also where it is in cooperation with the orchestra as well. Like any great piece, especially like a piece that is, involving an orchestra where there's many parts and many players, you're probably going to play it a lifetime and always learn something new about what musically is happening and certain things you can be listening to. It's like, oh, I didn't realize the violas have like that line there as well. I can really like be listening to that while I'm like, clinking my wine glasses. So there's a lot in there to be discovering.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean,
yeah,
I
go ahead.
will say too, I think it's been kind of, I don't know if you want to call it fun, Victor, but there's five versions of this piece now.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
so, because there's the original like version for the Albany Symphony's Dogs of Desire ensemble, which is sort of like a chamber ensemble, like a large chamber ensemble. And then we did a full
Hmm.
orchestra version for the Albany Symphony, and then a wind ensemble version, like a band, full symphonic band. And then there's a chamber winds version that I made like during COVID so we could do the piece kind of socially distanced. and
Right. Right.
and then the one that ACO is doing this month is a like reduced orchestra version, sort of like a Beethoven sized orchestra. And
Hmm.
so uh, I think, and every time I made a new version of the piece, I kind of added stuff or re-scored things or reworked things. So I think the sandbox is always kind of like having to adapt to whatever changes I make. And
Yeah, it's fun though. It's fun. I mean, it's interesting, like the transition from like an orchestra version to like a wind band version. I have to sort of, because we are really listening to the orchestra part and we know who has the bass line here. It's like, oh, it's in the basses, but like now it's in like the bari sax. So like
Hmm.
I need to be ready for that, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So the piece renewal is renewable. I think that's
Absolutely.
that's very synergetic.
It's yeah, it's like constantly like renewing itself in a way, which is
Yeah.
really cool. And it's been a really fun journey with the piece too to um kind of adapt it for all these different instrumentations and people often ask me what my favorite version of it is, and I
Hmm.
really don't have one because I think each one has its own sort of each one has moments that are my favorites.
I wonder if this journey with the piece over the years has had an impact on the broader point of the piece. You know, having that idea of renewable energy and renewable resources in mind. Victor, I guess I'll start with you. Has your relationship with that concept evolved or been impacted by your relationship with this piece over the years?
Yeah, I think it has. You know, the piece is a sort of wonderful reminder that um, if we want to achieve difficult things or if we want to achieve even just simple things, like we have to be working together and collaborating together. And, that's literally how the piece came to life, like our close collaboration with Viet, our collaboration with the Albany Symphony, and with now other, like countless other large ensembles like the ACO, that sort of collaboration is what brought the piece to life even further, all these different versions of it. I think that, that is a very clear for the piece, but it's also we start to think about ways that can affect our everyday life. If we can see that through music, if we can see that happening successfully through music, then like maybe we can also um, we can do that successfully out in the real world as well. And I think if I think about what makes collaboration on the stage in this piece successful, usually it is knowing, or always it's knowing when I need to be heard and knowing when I need to listen, and listen to the other people around me who are playing. And maybe I need to actually be getting some information from them to be able to know what I need to say or how I need to say something next. And, I think directly, if we can all think of moments when we have been in conversation with other people about any topic, in the world, I think that there's always moments when we're like, yeah, I should know when to speak and I should know when to listen. And that is obvious in music. And I think it's obvious in the real world as well.
Viet, I wonder if you have a similar reaction or relationship with that idea, this piece of music having an impact on the quote unquote real world engagement of cooperation, renewable resources, and those sorts of things.
Oh, yes. And I think Victor put it so beautifully. Um, it does kind of, in a way, I think, remind anyone who's experiencing the piece that when you look on a stage and you see a whole orchestra playing together, there's so much happening collaboratively. And it's kind of sometimes I think it's miraculous that 70 people who probably come from all walks of life, all ages, whatever, and they can actually like come together and sound good on something. It's really incredible. And to kind of have a piece that reminds everyone who's experiencing it that like this miraculous thing is happening here. Um, and that, you know, if we listen and speak up when we need to, uh, other miraculous things can happen. And I think it's also like a even just sort of on a simple level, like just a hopeful sort of reminder and reminder of mindfulness as well. That
Yep.
you know this the world is going through things, and we need to be mindful of what it's going through. And maybe I don't know, maybe people leave feeling energized to do their part or think about maybe who they're voting for a little bit more and but I don't know, we'll see. It's that's the sort of thing where it's like, well, I this piece is saying what it's saying, and then everyone can have their own sort of you know relationship with that moment.
Hmm. Yep. Viet, you're reminding me of broader responsibilities and broader impact of the orchestral industry to the world. We've spent the last few years really focusing on things like equity and diversity and how that manifests through programming and the way that we incorporate new music into those conversations. I wonder if you have ideas on the degree to which the orchestral industry in general should be paying attention to issues of climate change. Do you see a responsibility there for the industry?
Yeah, because I think anyone who has a platform to say something that they believe in should use it. And these orchestras have large platforms in some way. They might not be selling out stadiums of 70,000 people, but there are a lot of people who go to these concerts. And I think, if anything, it's just like about kind of getting people to think about some things on in a context that's not watching the news
Hmm.
or uh, scrolling through their Twitter or their Facebook and getting information that way. It's like for an orchestra to kind of present ideas in a way like this is like in a way more abstract, of course, because it's music. But sometimes abstraction like that can be a good way to kind of start thinking about things where you're not feeling like you're necessarily being told what to think in a certain way, but kind of uh, invited to think.
Hmm. Yeah. Victor, how do you think about that from the performer perspective? And I'll add, I mean, do you second guess buying a new pair of drumsticks? Is it like how do all of these things come into play from your side?
Yeah, yeah, I love what Viet said about inviting people to be thinking more about these things. You never know like who you're going to reach and to what extent through a concert. So I think obviously we want the music to be music that we're excited to play. Like, and I think that if we're excited to play the music and it also has a great message, it's great for so many reasons. And like it's so fun to play this piece or really play in any symphonic setting because chances are you're going to reach a lot more people just because it's such a rich art form. It's such a rich ensemble that has so much history that like anyone walking down the street, they probably at some point have heard an orchestra play music. They probably maybe haven't heard a percussion quartet play a percussion quartet concert, but like, which is fine. But, it's just like it casts a little bit of a wider net. And because it casts a wider net, we have this opportunity to, play a piece that we really love, but then also tell them about something or invite them to think about something with us that maybe they didn't think about before. So I think if somebody were to hear that and even it influenced them enough to go meet a colleague at work a couple days later and they were like, oh, I saw this piece that it was about renewable energy and it actually used like these three different forms of renewable energy as the three different parts of the piece. And it made me think about like, oh, I didn't realize that water powered things powered by water was something that like you even really could do, in the world. Like maybe they're not going to go and then like work at some factory or something that like specializes in that, but just having that conversation with somebody else, I think that it is reaching then another person, and then that person could then reach another person, and it's sort of like dominoes like that. I think as soon as you have somebody speaking about something that you did that's not you telling them, like it's they're learning about it through a third party, I think that's when you know that you're saying something that hopefully can be impactful.
So, Viet, I'll ask you the last question. What do you see as organizations like ACO, their role, our role in engaging new music in this way? How is ACO uniquely positioned, in your opinion, to really push these conversations further in art spaces and into the broader world?
Well, I mean, ACO, it's in the name, American Composers Orchestra. um, to 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 present the music of today and show that composers these days have just as many beautiful and complex and uh, just unique things to say as hundreds of years ago. And um, heard on the radio, like, all music was new at one point.
Hmm.
Yeah.
and and I think also the what organizations can think about too is not just presenting like brand new music, but trying um, to build relationships with composers that extend beyond the premiere and into future performances or um, of pieces that they believe in as well by living composers. And I mean, I see Sandbox, like when Sandbox commissions a piece, it's not just about like commissioning it and premiering it. It's about uh, sharing it with as many people as they can. And that's just a beautiful thing.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Viet Cuong and Victor Caccese. Be sure to check out their performance of Renewal coming up on October 20th, featuring the American Composers Orchestra and Sandbox Percussion. For more information, be sure to visit americancomposers.org for some of our upcoming performances, some of our composer advancement initiatives, and anything you need there. Until next time.